Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first annual JAGA Futures Forum. This is a long time in the making. We started organizing this event last year as a way to bring not only the business community, but also students and the academic community together. And what a wonderful way to do so here at Georgia Tech. My name is Yoshi Domoto. I'm the Executive Director of the Japan-America Society at Georgia. I'm so thrilled that you all are all here. We have over 100 people today, so really excited to be sharing the true importance of U.S. Japan relations and how important it is today to really have reliable and ongoing, continuous partnership with friends from all over the world. So through today's program, we're going to be celebrating the 50+ years the partnership between Japan and Georgia. Actually, the state of Georgia celebrated its 50-year anniversary of its first international office of all places in Tokyo last year. And this year, we have two 50-year anniversaries. The Consulate General of Japan here in Atlanta is celebrating 50 years. Yes, Consul General. And not only the consulate, but the Georgia-Japan Language School, or the Hoshiko, is also celebrating 50 years. So let's give them a round of applause as well. So as part of our festivities today, we have 3 separate sessions. The first session, right now that we'll be starting momentarily, is the Geostrategy luncheon and panel discussion. And afterwards, we will have a networking break in which all the Japanese companies that are with us today has tables out in the Student Success Hall of Success right here outside of our room. So definitely visit all the different companies to learn about all the great things that are doing here in Georgia. Sessions 2 is the interactive dialogue on ways we can foster our ties between Georgia and Japan moving forward and cultivating our next 50 years. And then session 3 is our networking break and the Business and Career Expo that we'll have after each session at the end of the program as well. So speaking of which, don't forget to collect the stickers from each table that the companies will have. And once you collect all the stickers, turn in those sheets to the registration table and you'll get a chance to win a door prize at the very end of the evening, today's event. So definitely collect all the stickers as much as you can. We have some special prizes for everyone who collects them. So definitely do that. And at this time, let's get started. It is my pleasure to introduce you the chair of the Japan-America Society of Georgia, Mr. Jit Mutkum, for opening remarks and get us started with our program. Jim-san,
we really appreciate it. We know that all of you are busy. We know that you have huge schedules, and we sincerely appreciate you taking time to celebrate the 50th year, the 50th anniversary of the Consulate of Japan with us today, as Yoshi-san mentioned. As you know, Japan is one of the top foreign investors in Georgia with over 600 Japanese companies in Georgia. It employs more than 35,000 people. The investment in Georgia by Japanese companies is 11 billion plus. That's a lot of money. So we think today is a perfect time and a perfect way to commemorate the close ties that Georgia has with Japan and Japan with Georgia. And we appreciate each and every one of you and what you do as individuals to bring those ties, cement those ties. Before we begin, real quickly, allow me to recognize some special guests that we have with us here tonight, starting with our 2 guest speakers. Very, very dignified individuals with us here today, and we sincerely appreciate it. Our senior fellow and director from the Center for a New American Security, Miss Lisa Curtis, is with us. Thank you. Also with us today, just off the plane from Japan, is Associate Professor from Aoyama Gakuin University School of International Politics, Mr. Tomohiko Satake. I should mention that Miss Lisa Curtis is joining us from DC as well, so we appreciate both of you traveling here for this event. And finally, and certainly not least, but I see Consul General Mio Maeda back there. Welcome again, and thank you for joining us. Also, allow me to take this opportunity to thank all the organizations for their generous support, ongoing, past, and future, and helping today to make this a wonderful, wonderful event. The National Association of Japan-American Societies, the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, our host today, the Georgia Institute of Technology, and Mr. James Holdley that makes this all possible. Professor Holdley, thank you very much. He's with the International Business Education and Research, or also known as CYBER. All of the companies that are participating with us here today, what a great opportunity. We're going to have some networking, as Yoshi-san mentioned a little earlier, and we hope that that everyone takes advantage of that. The Georgia Department of Economic Development, always a huge supporter, so we very much appreciate that. The Georgia Japan Language School, Hoshuko, which was mentioned earlier, this is also their 50th anniversary, and we're very proud of them and the work that they do here. So thank you very much to all our members of Hoshuko here. Highland is another sponsor. The Japan-American Society of Georgia, of course. We enjoy doing this. Many hands make light work, and let me say that there have been a lot of hands involved in this, and I want to point out Miss Nozomi Morgan for her efforts in leading this today. Thank you very much. JET Alumni Association, yes, well deserved. JET Alumni Association of the Southeast, Mizuno USA, Quip USA, Shimizu North America, Toyo Tire North America, and YKK Corporation. YKK is a consistent, wonderful sponsor. All of those aforementioned, please, we really appreciate your help. We thank you for it. We look forward to a lot of great opportunities. And at this time, I want to introduce our own Consul General, Mr. Mio Maida. If you would please come up and make a couple of remarks and we'll get this thing kicked off. Thank you very much. Thank you, Consul General.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me. And and also I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the organizers of this splendid event. And well, as Jimmy-san and Yoshi-san mentioned, this year we are going to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the establishment of our office. And well, so far to be honest, we haven't held any kind of celebratory event on our own. But so far we have had two events to celebrate the establishment of the office. So I think it's very lucky for us, and it's going to be our turn to hold that kind of event in the near future. So in that occasion, we try to invite many of you to that event. But anyway, thank you so much. And I think that at this moment, the Japan-U.S. relations has been enjoying one of the best seasons since the end of the World War II. And this good relations which we are now enjoying is not only because of the effort by the two governments of the two countries, but also the exchange program and the effort by the grassroots organizations and the people are kind of integral part of it. And this event, this forum is also the part of it. And and in particular, today's theme, which is exploring the past, present, and future of the ever more important partnership between Japan and the United States. It is so relevant and timely to discuss at this juncture. Because if we look at the international community, which is facing with a lot of challenges, such as aggressive actions by some countries, the economic coercion by other countries, the risk of the war, or the war is happening in several parts of the world. So it is very important to, as you said, that the international community has been facing challenges against the shared values, or the open and the concept of the open and free and open international order based on the rule of law is harshly challenged by the such actions and such activities. So it is because of that Japan and U.S., which shares the common values, should and have to enhance the cooperation and collaboration between those two countries to ensure those international order, and to realize a safe and secure world where the human dignity is protected. So we'd like to see, so I do wish that the discussion in this forum will be fruitful and very informative, and I do hope this forum will be a successful conclusion. So with this, I'd like to thank you all, and I'd like to finish my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Consul General, and happy birthday to the Consulate for 50 years. All right, to get us started with our first session, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce our host today, and one of our co-organizers, Georgia Tech Cyber, the Associate Director, Mr. James Hoadley. Hoadley Sensei, yoroshiku onegaishimasu.
I think we'd like to ask the panelists to come on up. We don't really need to, after all the introductions, I don't think we need to do it again, which is awesome. I think people, the main thing you want to get to is you want to get to the discussion.
It's a real pleasure to be here, and I would like to thank the professor for moderating the session, and to the Japan American Society for inviting me here today. It's a pleasure to be here. So, the Center for a New American Security, CNAS, has been around for about 16 years. It's one of the many think tanks in Washington, D.C. that deals with national security and foreign policy issues. But I think what makes CNAS unique is a couple of things. One, we are truly a bipartisan and independent think tank. So you will find people who have worked both in Democratic administrations or Republican administrations, such as myself, having worked 4 years in the Trump administration at the National Security Council. But you really will find that at CNAS, we focus on not politics, but what are the best policies for the United States government to protect U.S. national security and have the best foreign policy possible. Another thing that makes CNAS unique is our focus on building up the next generation of foreign policy and national security leaders. We really do have a great internship program. It's highly competitive, for young people to come and work at CNAS. They know that if they start their career there, they're likely to go into the U.S. government. And so there are a lot of opportunities. We have a next generation program, we call it the Next Gen program, where we focus on early to mid-level career people, most of them in the U.S. government, some in the private sector as well, that have maybe worked 5 to 10 years already. But we bring them in so they can network with each other. They get to hear senior level speakers come and talk, and we take them on trips to Asia usually. So it's a great program for them to move to that next level in their career. So that's a major focus of CNAS. Of course, we were started by Kurt Campbell, who is now our Deputy Secretary of State. and Michelle Flournoy, who was previously Deputy Secretary of Defense under the Obama administration.
Another very important mission is to encourage some security debate in Japanese society, because compared to the US or the UK, our security discourse or security community is quite weak. Whenever we talk about defense security issues, we tend to focus on whether this is constitutional or not, or whether you are pro-America or anti-America, or something like that. And we don't have real strategic debate. What kind of military equipment we have, and what kind of strategy we should implement. So that kind of discourse we really need, and how to encourage that kind of real debate. That's our main missions, and that's why my former colleagues always appear on Japanese TV quite these days, and then talk about some defense issues. So should I talk about geopolitical challenges or something like that? Right? Okay, sure. I think Japan is located in one of the most dangerous places in the world, I would say. Where we are surrounded by China, by North Korea, and increasingly belligerent Russia. The China has continued to expand what is called gray zone expansion in the region surrounding Japan, whereas the North Korea continuously develop missile and nuclear weapons, and I think their military and the missile technologies is pretty much advanced now, and it's very getting harder and harder to intercept by Japanese missile defense system. So that's a great concern for us. Russia, former Prime Minister Abe tried to maintain good relations with Russia by meeting with Putin for more than 26 times. And that was based on the calculation that we could probably separate both Russia and China, as long as we can maintain good relations with Russia. But that was a dream, actually. Despite such effort, Russia has been increasingly aligned with China. And now we are surrounded by what is called the three-front crisis. China, North Korea, and Russia, rather than separating avoiding two fronts or so on. And that's the very reason why the Prime Minister Kishida has undertook what is called a fundamental reinforcement of defense policies, something like that. So maybe I should stop here right now.
Okay, before I ask the next question, I always find it's good to judge the level of the room that we're in. I teach undergrad, so it's always good to make sure that we know that first. So when I say the Quad, I think there are three categories of people. So let's define them as the Quad, and when I say how your opinion is, please raise your hand. So category one is, yes, I understand the Quad, and I know great detail about it, and I want to discuss the very intimate details of it. Anybody in that category, show of hands. Okay, thank you. Category two, I've heard of the Quad, but I don't really know what it is, and I'm here to learn more about it. Show of hands. Okay. Category three, I once tore my quad and it hurt really bad. Okay. Good. So now we know where we are when we talk about the quad.
Okay, all right.
So the next question, I actually have two separate questions, but I think I could smush them together, and Lisa and Satake Sensei, you can hand them off. So what is so unique about the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, the Quad? Can you share how it was created under the Abe administration? And can you characterize what its most significant activities are? And for Satake Sensei, what is Prime Minister Kishida's position, and what do you think will continue with whatever happens domestically in Japanese politics with the Quad and the relationship?
Great. All right. Well, it's good to know that most people don't know what the Quad is. It's fairly new, so that's understandable. The Quad is made up of the U.S., India, Australia, and Japan. It's a non-military grouping because, of course, even though Australia and Japan are allies of the United States, India is not. And India, is a strategic partner. It's an increasingly close partner of the United States, but it never will be an ally of the United States. So the Quad actually was the brainchild of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, going back to 2007 when he was first Prime Minister. he looked at India and he saw that India, being a maritime power, being a democracy, it was increasingly important to bring it into cooperation and have it be a part of the U.S. Australia-Japan trilateral grouping. So he had the idea for these nations to meet at a very senior level, and this of course followed their very practical cooperation to provide humanitarian and disaster relief following the 2004 tsunami that happened on Boxing Day, December 26, 2004, that we all remember in Southeast Asia. So these four nations cooperated to provide disaster relief. They sort of saw, hey, you know, there's some real things that we can do together. But it was Shinzo Abe who had that idea that, you know, also coining the phrase free and open Indo-Pacific, and saw India as critically important to pushing through with that goal. But what happened was there was one meeting held at a senior level in 2007. China didn't like it, complained about it, said you're all trying to gang up on us. And for various reasons, the countries backed away, and the Quad never met again until 2017, when I was at the National Security Council during the Trump administration. The Quad revived, and it met at the Assistant Secretary, Director General level in Manila on the sidelines of the EAS ASEAN meetings, and proceeded to keep meeting at that level pretty soon. Within a couple years, foreign ministers started meeting, and now you fast forward to today, where the leaders meet every year, and I think they've met 4 times during the Biden administration. And again, it's a non-military grouping. They deal with things like climate change, emerging technology cooperation. During the COVID crisis, they worked on vaccines and responding to that crisis. Maritime security is another big issue that they've been cooperating on. And it's really a way for these 4 countries to, you know, seek to shape the regional order in the Indo-Pacific, and to provide alternatives to countries, you know, alternatives to China's Belt and Road Initiative, for instance. So it's an important grouping, and it's one that I think is here to stay. I think it'll continue meeting and being an important counterweight to China's increasing influence in this region. And even though the group shies away from military cooperation, I personally believe that they should start talking about potential contingencies in either the Taiwan Strait or the South China Sea, and eventually move into more security cooperation. They're not quite there yet, but I believe that circumstances will dictate that eventually they'll become more of a defense and security grouping.
Well, I have a few things to add to what Lisa said, but Quad is not necessarily created by Prime Minister Abe's personal initiative. I think it reflected the geostrategic reality in the Pacific, which is not only the rise of China, but also the rise of India, as Lisa mentioned. And the basic idea is how to incorporate India's power into the regional power balance, so that we can maintain a stable, what is called rules-based international order. And the U.S., of course, is still dominant in military terms, but not so much in economy and technology. And China has been catching up, in these areas, or already dominant in some areas of the newly emerging technology and so on. So how can we just counterbalance against China's growing power influence? And that's most important. And although Quad is, focusing on non-military dimensions, it definitely focuses on security issues like economic security or climate security and so on. And one important area, maybe which I would like to raise, is whether or not we can share some labor forces, given that most advanced democracies, advanced economies like Japan U.S. Australia suffer from the labor shortage. And that's a serious issue for Australia's defense policy. For example, they're actually introducing nuclear subs right now, but there are a few people who can construct those submarines. So why don't we just swap some labor forces between Australia and India and Japan and India, and that kind of cooperation could be, I think, possible, although it is very difficult.
Thank you. Elisa, I wanted to ask for a little more dig down on something that you said. The U.S. and India will never be an ally, which was a very interesting statement. I'm interested to hear more about that. But you have a unique perspective on U.S. Indo-Pacific relations. So how would you characterize the U.S. relationship with India? Do you think it's similar or different to the America's diplomatic ties to Japan and Australia and the other members of the Quad? And perhaps you can also highlight as well, India recently, talking about joint security, the Indian Navy recently recaptured a Somali pirate hijacked ship in an area of the world where the U.S. is currently fighting with the Houthis. Is this an area where there can be collaboration for the Quad as well? Is, I guess, basically what I would want to know.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. And yes, as I was saying, the U.S.-India relationship has improved by leaps and bounds over the last 20 years. It's really been a bipartisan issue. Both Democratic and Republican administrations have seen the wisdom in building up the U.S.-India relationship and building that cooperation. For instance, during the Trump administration, there was an effort to provide India increased access to technology. For instance, India was the first non-NATO partner to receive armed drone technology, to be allowed to receive that kind of technology from the United States. That was in 2018. The U.S. also elevated India's status to Strategic Trade Authorization 1 status, which means it gained more access to dual-use items from the United States. In addition, the U.S. and India completed several defense-enabling agreements that allowed them to increase intelligence and information sharing, and to be able to do a lot more in terms of military exercises, and those kinds of things. So, I think the U.S. and India are doing everything, short of what we would see in the kind of alliance relationship that the U.S. has with Japan and Australia and Philippines, and NATO countries as well. And I think that's where, the questions come. If there was a conflict involving U.S. and China in the Taiwan Strait or in the South China Sea, how would India respond? And, I'm skeptical that India would send warships or do anything that might be provocative to China, because India has its own border conflict, or border tensions, rather, with China, that it has to pay attention to. And of course, China is ahead of India militarily, and India is vulnerable when it comes to its land border with China. So for that reason, I don't think that we could expect India would get involved in any significant way if there was a U.S.-China conflict. But in my opinion, that's not what building up the U.S.-India relationship is all about. It's about making sure that India has the capabilities to, stand up to China on its own border, and that India, will work with the other Quad countries in, providing a more liberal, rules-based order that will serve as a counter to some of the things China is trying to do. So, I think all in all, the U.S.-India relationship is on very firm footing. You can see the Biden administration has prioritized relations with India. Some of the things it has done, it's established this initiative on critical and emerging technologies, where the national security advisors have been meeting, and under that agreement, The U.S. has agreed to co-produce jet engines with India, which is, a very big deal. And it's not only about the military security cooperation. The U.S.-India economics and trade relationship is also very strong. And the people-to-people ties. I think there's 250,000 Indian students that are studying in the U.S. right now. So yeah, that's a little bit about how India fits into the whole Quad partnership. Okay.
I was just going to do a quick check. How are our people doing on our Quad folks that want to learn more about it? We're doing good. Okay, we're not too deep in the weeds. Okay, thank you. Always check. For the people who are like, you tore your quad, Admiral. So for Satake Sensei, I think I remember from your background, you did spend some time in Australia. So the next question is going to come up with, the people here, we're going to assume have an awareness of U.S.-Japan relations, and don't disabuse me of that belief. Can you please share some insights on what Japan's relationship with Australia is like, and how do you think Japan-Australia relations are similar and different to Japan's diplomatic and security ties with both the U.S. and India?
Sure. I'm not sure how many people are interested in Australia, but I think Japan and Australia are similar in many respects. We are close U.S. allies, of course, and we are sometimes described as the northern and southern anchors of the U.S. Regional strategies. And we also share some democratic values such as freedom, democracy, and rule of law. And most importantly, we are interested in what is called rules-based, maintain the rules-based international order. Also, we share similar identities, which is a kind of middle ground between the East and West. Australia has its roots from Europe, of course, but geographically located to the Asia, across the Asia, whereas Japan actually became westernized after the Meiji restorations. But at the same time, we are located in what is called Far East, in Asia. So that kind of ambivalence in identities made us actually, cooperate toward more kind of inclusive region, including the both East and West, or North and South. That kind of similarity actually matters a lot. And what is called Asia-Pacific or Indo-Pacific geostrategic construct actually fit for the purpose. And most importantly, Quad includes India, which is the leader of the global South. And that's really important for our kind of vision. Always try to create inclusive rather than exclusive region or open to the other parts of the world. That's I think that's pretty enough about Australia. Okay.
All right, I think now it's time to address the dragon in the room. The Quad is widely perceived, at least you kind of hinted at this, as a response to the rise of China. Lisa, if you could talk a little bit about the United States' relationship with China, which has gone from friend to enemy to frenemy to mean girl, and describe how that's going and where you expect it to go in the short term. And also, Satake Sensei, if you could respond with Japan's relationship with China as well, which has its own issues.
I didn't know Professor Hoadley was a stand-up comic on the side. I appreciate that. So, people often ask, if we have a change in administration, we have an election coming up in November, as you know. Will there be a major change in the U.S. approach to China? I don't think so. I think that the current approach to China was largely built from the Trump administration approach. And I say that because when I was in the Trump administration, we worked on a strategy, the Indo-Pacific Strategic Framework. And we worked on this in the summer of 2017 into the fall of 2017. And finally, we had this major strategy, how to approach the Indo-Pacific region that was signed by President Trump in February of 2018. And that pretty much drove our strategy in the region and our strategy towards China for the rest of the Trump administration. Of course, COVID changed some things and changed the rhetoric, et cetera. But by and large, there was a very clear direction. And if you compare the Biden administration's Indo-Pacific strategy, which came out in February 2022, and you put that next to the Indo-Pacific Strategic Framework, which actually was released to the public in January 2021, you'll see a lot of similarities. You'll see basic assumptions about China, the idea that, the era of engagement with China, or trying to include China in various multilateral activities and groupings would make them a responsible stakeholder. You'll see that a lot of people have said that just didn't work. We need a new approach. We need to protect the U.S. technological edge. We need to make sure that we're competing effectively with China, and we need to work with allies and partners to check some of the increased Chinese aggression that we've seen in the last few years. Now, there has been the resumption of dialogue with the meeting between President Biden and President Xi, which took place last October or November on the fringes of the APEC meeting, October, I think it was, and the resumption of military-to-military talks, which is significant. This does show that things have calmed down a little bit, tensions have gone down a little bit between the two countries. But I think we have to think about what is motivating China to agree to this resumption of dialogue. And I think it could be simply to make sure that China doesn't become the main issue in the U.S. election campaign. China looks at U.S. politics and sees, a very polarized environment, and perhaps, wants to make sure that China doesn't become an issue, which of course would not be to China's benefit. But also an effort to try to slow down some of the export controls that the Biden administration has put in place, most specifically on the semiconductor technology. So it could be, a tactical move by China. And I think we have to keep looking at what China's actions are. And if you look at what happened just a couple of weeks ago, I was actually in the Philippines, and we were doing a Quad Plus dialogue, which means the Quad countries that we've been talking about, plus the Philippines. And we were talking about, this is a track 2, so non-government officials talking about maritime security, deterrence, economic security. And as we're talking about these issues in the real world, we saw another collision that caused by China between a Chinese Coast Guard vessel and a Philippines vessel that was trying to resupply the Philippines outpost at Second Thomas Shoal in the South China Sea. This is a disputed area, but the Philippines has basically controlled that outpost for the last 25 years. And China's now trying to disrupt the Philippines' ability to resupply the Marines that are on a World War II era ship that has been grounded there, but they're trying to disrupt their ability to resupply so that they can eventually, claim the territory. So, things like this, we continue to see aggressive actions, trying to dominate the South China Sea, trying to undermine these countries' territorial and maritime sovereignty. So these are the things that we need to keep addressing, even as we allow the dialogue to continue.
Relations with China is comparatively stable over the past few years. Actually, we agreed to maintain so-called mutually beneficial strategic partnership, which is originally decided in 2008 between two leaders. And that's partly because of China's domestic politics. I think Xi administration is currently preoccupied with some domestic concerns, such as anti-corruption or aging, or of course economic downturns and so on. So they can't afford to actually have some problems with other countries, and they also need to improve some international image of China, which has been harshly damaged by the outbreak of the COVID-19 in 2020. And China's so-called economic coercion or economic sanctions against Australia, Korea, Japan, the Philippines actually also, worsened their kind of national image. And now, they're actually inviting some counterbalance against China, such as Quad is a good example, but also, they created AUKUS as well. So I think in order to maintain a stable economic development, I think China needs to have good relations with neighbor countries. And that's the reason why China has tried to improve their relations, not only with Japan, but also with the U.S., with Australia, and Korea as well. Which doesn't necessarily mean that the current stable relationship will continue forever. And actually, the former Japanese ambassador to China described Japan-China relationship just like a jet coaster. It always goes, up and then suddenly goes down. And especially it's influenced by the U.S.-China relationship. Japan-China relationship is a kind of function of the U.S.-China relationship. So we are carefully watching the ongoing election campaign in the United States, and we are not sure if after the new president comes and what kind of China-U.S. relationship will appear. And that also affects our relationship with China as well.
Thank you. So I wanted to ask a question that is not actually on our approved list. I apologize for taking the advantage to go off here. So I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago when there was the announcement that Nippon Steel was going to buy U.S. Steel. And this does have a security component to it. And the article that I wrote was, it's so great. We've moved past the era of Japan bashing when people were actually smashing Japanese cars and motorcycles and things like that. And it was a good thing that I had set that article on future release, because within 24 hours it went really, really, really south. And the argument as to why Nippon Steel should be barred from acquiring U.S. Steel is a security argument. That's the ones that have been voiced by the people who have been opposing it for the most part. So I guess from the question that I'm asking is this, how does this figure into U.S. security, and how is the opposition to the purchase viewed in Japan? Is it a return to the bad old days of Japan bashing, or is this just a one-time relic that will pass? So.
Yeah, I think this is really about domestic politics, in my viewpoint, and President Biden, just feeling like he has to, look like he's standing by the steel union and, making sure he's protecting it's an economic security issue, really, is what I think he's trying to say. So, I think it can have an impact on overall, Japan-U.S. relations. It's an irritant, I guess you would say. But there are so many, positive things happening in terms of the overall geostrategic partnership. Japan being extremely important, the most important, ally for the United States when it looks at its number one challenge, which is China. And the fact that Prime Minister Kishida will be here in a couple of weeks, April 10th, for a state-level visit, the first state-level visit in, 15 years? I think since 2015, so I guess not quite, almost 10 years, I guess. This is a big deal. It will highlight how important the U.S.-Japan alliance is. There's also going to be a meeting with Philippines President Marcos, the first ever trilateral meeting between the U.S., Japan, and Philippines, happening on August 11th. This shows, Japan and the U.S. Standing side by side to support the Philippines in its time of need when it's facing aggression from China. So I think, all of these positive geostrategic convergences between Japan and the United States will be the focus rather than, what's happening over the steel issue.
Yes, I don't know much about the steel issue, so I have a few comments about that. But I think there is a kind of legitimate reason for the U.S. side to have some concern about Japanese security clearance, because we actually introduced a new special secret law in 2012 or 2013, I forgot. But anyway, that law only covers defense and security issues and didn't cover economic security and technologies as well. And that's the reason why the government has tried to introduce new security clearance laws, and that also covers those kind of technologies and other the economic security issues. I hope that kind of law could improve situations. And compared to Australia, for example, Australia has a big intelligence community, and not only government officials but also business people have their own clearance. And I guess here in the US is the same. But Japan doesn't have that kind of intelligence community as it is. So I think it's still developing process right now.
And so as you've highlighted, the Quad is not a military cooperation a treaty or anything like that. How exactly does the Quad figure into the security picture in the Indo-Pacific in terms of if it's not a security, it's an agreement? I guess I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around exactly where the Quad fits in the scheme of things.
I guess I would highlight what they're doing on maritime security. You have the Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness Initiative that the Quad has launched. And they're working with countries in the region to provide, commercially available, satellite imagery and different kinds of imagery to be able to establish a common operating picture about what is happening in the exclusive economic zones of these countries and their own territorial seas. And so, the idea is that the Quad countries are helping these countries maintain their own sovereignty and protect their own maritime space. And so that's one area that, it's not military cooperation, but it is security cooperation, and it's aimed at, deterring aggressive activities like Chinese gray zone activities that we've talked about. So I think, that is a security issue that they're working on. If you talk about the cooperation on critical and emerging technologies, that also is very much security related. If we're talking about AI and how that's going to influence military equipment and the development of military equipment, how it's going to impact cybersecurity. This is another area that the Quad delves into. And we've talked about economic security and the Quad working together to provide infrastructure alternatives to the other countries. We've seen this play out in the Pacific Islands with Palau, where India was not a participant, but Japan, Australia, and the U.S. cooperated to provide a subsea cable to Palau, because what we've seen is China was really starting to dominate that sector in controlling the communications technologies in this strategic part of the world. So I think even though it's not a military organization, it's dealing with critical security issues that again will help shape the overall environment in this region, which has remained peaceful and free seaways. There are trillions of dollars of trade going through these seaways. And for the last 75 years, that has all been protected. And I think countries like the U.S. and Japan want to see it continue operating in that way. And that's the idea behind the Quad and why it's so important, even if it's not a military organization, that they continue to work in tandem and collaboration.
Yeah. I think she said everything what I wanted to say. So maybe
I'm sure that's not true.
All right, I think Yoshi indicated to me that we are open for Q&A. Yes? Yeah, we can go ahead. So any questions from the audience? I'm going to pass the mic or gentleman back here, and then we'll get over. Oh boy, to go back. We need more microphones.
Is it working or not?
Here first. Okay, Tom Taylor, a question that I've dealt with a lot within the sphere there is piracy in the Malacca Straits, the South China Sea. Can you just maybe address that? It's a big problem.
You're gonna get a workout, Yoshi.
Do you want to go first?
Well, Japan has been sending some ships to the Gulf of Aden since 2009 to engage with counter-piracy issues. And I think the government reduced the number of ships from 2 to 1 quite recently because of shortage of ships. Anyway. But anyway, we understand it's a very important things, and we actually continue engaging with other countries in order to cope with those piracy things.
Yeah, when you talk about the Malacca Straits and the Indian Ocean region, obviously India plays an increasingly important role there. India recently joined the Combined Maritime Forces maritime grouping, which frankly it probably should have joined a long time ago. It was a little late to the game, but they are part of that now. But it reminds me of when I was just in the Philippines over the last couple of weeks. We did a TTX, and it was based on a South China Sea contingency where a typhoon had hit the Philippines, and China was trying to use the opportunity of the crisis to create a blockade to gain control of that Second Thomas Shoal area. But at the same time, there was provocations in the Malacca Strait. A Chinese nuclear armed SSN submarine surfaced. There's an aircraft carrier at a Burmese port, Chinese aircraft carrier. And so what we saw is that, when the U.S. and Japan were really focused on what was happening in the South China Sea, India could watch and sort of protect the Malacca Straits area and the Indian Ocean region. So again, it shows that critical role where you're talking about this huge expanse of seaways that we're trying to protect and keep free. So India plays a critical role when it comes to that choke point at the Malacca Straits. And of course, India, off the coast of India, is the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which are at the mouth of the Malacca Strait. And I think in a crisis, hopefully India would provide the U.S. access to these areas. I think Japan has already had some investments there, which is quite remarkable. 5-10 years ago, India wouldn't have allowed any access to these sensitive islands, but it now has such a strong relationship with Japan that it's allowed Japan access there. So yeah, I think these are all important. The piracy issue, and as Professor raised earlier, what we're seeing in the Red Sea and some of the helpful actions India has taken there shows the important role that India will continue to play in protecting these seaways.
I think we have, 2 more questions? Three, okay.
I'm just going to do it. Steve Peck, I'm a director in cybersecurity at AT&T. So even in cybersecurity space, we see these emerging threats from AI, quantum computing, and semiconductors, right? So for what perspective, right? How you guys been collaborating to kind of encourage the development of these kind of emerging technologies, kind of save countries?
Gotta make sure.
Yeah, I think that's your topic.
Yeah, I would point to the AUKUS agreement. This is a U.S. Australia-UK agreement, which is part of the agreement. The Pillar 1 part of the agreement is about Australia gaining access to nuclear-powered submarine technology, and eventually, within 15 years or so, you'll have an AUKUS SSN nuclear-powered submarine. But there's a second pillar to that AUKUS agreement, And that is about technology collaboration and the three countries collaborating more to get the edge on innovation and to understand how these new technologies are impacting defense development and working together to stay on that cutting edge of developing critical defense items, things like undersea capabilities, unmanned undersea capabilities. That's a big issue. And they're talking about potentially a major announcement where Japan may join Pillar 2 of AUKUS. So this is something they've been talking about for a while, so we'll see. But we're hearing more and more that something may be announced at the state visit of Prime Minister Kishida in Washington. That would be a big deal. And it would show that the four countries were going to work together much more closely to harness innovation, to stay on the cutting edge of how these new technologies, AI, quantum computing, are going to impact the defense sector. So I think it's a very important issue, and I think it's one that countries like the U.S. and Japan need to tackle together. And you talked about some of the security issues that Japan is taking with regard to security clearances and such, so that there can be more cooperation in the future. But did you want to add?
Yeah, sure. Talked about the labor shortage, and that's heavily related to the new emerging technologies. And what AUKUS has been doing right now is to develop some kind of unmanned vehicles, especially underwater vehicles, so that they can actually solve the shortage of crews and also manpower issues. And that's going to be game changing, I think, once they can develop that kind of technologies, and that can actually solve those labor shortage issues. And then speaking cyber and I think information cooperation, I think one of the biggest points of Quad is India has a little bit different policy from Japan, U.S, Australia in terms of the data management. Whereas Japan, Australia, US always encourage the free flow of the data between countries. India tried to localize those data in their countries. They try to keep it in their own countries. And that's a kind of good example of how the Quad cooperation is very difficult. Sometimes our standards and norms are a bit different. So how to overcome those issues would be the critical for the future cooperation of Quad in terms of cyber and information security.
Yeah, last question.
Thank you. This question is for Professor Satake. Let's see now. We in the United States here, we have this thing called the elevator pitch. When you're in an elevator, you have 30 seconds to say something about yourself to promote that relationship. You flew all the way out here. I think I'd like to hear your elevator speech to an American, your message to U.S. personnel or U.S. people. What would Japan need out of the United States now? What would be your ask?
Well, I don't think I can keep 30 minutes, but just try. I actually traveled around America last August as a part of the IVLP, International Visitor Leadership Program, sponsored by the State Department. And I talked with many people, ordinarily just American people, and what I learned from that experience is that, well, that's what some people told me, but 95% of Americans are not interested in foreign policy, if I am not wrong. And only 5% of Americans are interested in foreign policy, and they are pretty much concerned about domestic issues. And that's not so surprising, given that America has been very strong. And you don't have to care about international relations because they are very powerful, and nobody can beat America. Why do you have to care about foreign affairs? But that's no longer the case right now. As I said, India and rise up rest, and China has been rapidly catching up. So you have to care about international issues. So always paying attention to what's happening across the world, whether in the Pacific, Middle East, and Europe. And that's very important. And that's what I always tell to my students at university. Always be conscious about what's going on in the world. Pay attention, and ignorance is the worst things, because we are condemning Hamas and Israel's, actions these days. But before Hamas's attacks Israel, nobody cared about that. Who cared about Middle East before that? So that kind of things, I think we try to encourage. And if you understand more, maybe you can solve the issues more, I think. So I hope that's, I kept 30 minutes, but anyway,
Are we hearing Love Thy Neighbor here?
Oh yeah, sure, of course, I love.
Okay, I think we're about ready to wrap it up, but to channel anybody who watches the Hot Ones, I love that show, the one where the people eat the hot wings. So I'm going to end with the same question that he has. So now that you haven't eaten hot wings, so you're not sitting here wondering why you did that, but you have given us a fantastic presentation, and I want to thank you very much for that. But now, in like maybe 30 seconds, if you could tell us what's going on for you, how people can find more about what you're doing, how they can follow, and people who are interested in learning more.
Great. Well, great, thank you. Yes, actually, we have a program coming up on March 28th. It's 8 a.m., it's a little early, but it's online, it's virtual, so anybody can tune in. And it's on U.S. Japan-Korea trilateral cooperation. So we are releasing a major report, and it's a rollout event for that report. So I would encourage you to tune in March 28th at 8 a.m. You can just listen in. You don't even have to turn on your camera if you don't want. But we would love to have you participate in that event. We will also have our annual conference, CNAS annual conference on June 6th. It's called High Stakes. Which I think describes the world situation right now. So we'll have top level speakers from the administration, expert community, talking about everything from the war in Ukraine to the Middle East crisis to the China challenge. So we'd love for you to jump in and join that. And you can always go to our website and read all of our materials, use it for your research, what have you. But yeah, I hope you'll put CNAS on your radar and listen to our events or read some of our material. Thank you.
Well, yes, as I said, NEET's my former workplace has a website, and they publish a lot of good materials to know Japanese defense and security policies. So that's one way. The other way is just to Google my name and find some publications. I just published a book about Japan-Australia relations last year, and if I found it on Amazon, please put some good reviews also, even if you don't read it. That's complete my speech. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. I'll turn it over to Yoshi, but yeah, if you could again give another round of applause to our speakers, and give a round of applause to yourselves as well.